Hello, everyone. My name is Stephen Kirsch. This week we were tasked with looking at articles from JSTOR. I looked at Robert M. Epstein's The Creation and Evolution of the Army Corps and the American Civil War, Andrew S. Blestow's Beyond the Chessboard of War, and Ronald K. Kyle Jr.'s Grant, Meade, and Clausewitz, The Applications of War as an Extension of Policy During the Vicksburg and Gettysburg Campaigns. This week, just looking at generals and how their personal lives led them to lead in these various levels of leadership. Um, they were tasked initially with bolstering the army from 16,000 active duty members from the beginning of the war to a force that would be able to defend the country and defeat the Confederacy. A lot of these soldiers and generals studied Klaus von Clausewitz, who was a Prussian general, and learned a lot of leadership from him in their schooling, while non-military schools like West Point leaned more on the Napoleonic aspects of warfare. These articles looked at how these generals led and their personal lives, and how that like made their decisions on the battlefield. And even though these men went into battle, remembering that they were just that, men, they were people. And these three articles look at that mainly with the North, looking at official records, correspondence, and written orders, including Epstein and Kyle Jr. looking at Grant's personal biography and records to give an insight on how these generals led. Um, the other information that was used was Congress reports that added to how these generals led and field manuals that would come after the war, but that were used uh, by referencing how these Civil War generals led. The change of command from the early part, where it was these unsure generals like Burnside and uh, other generals, uh, the shift to generals that led with force, like Grant. Um, Kyle Jr. quoted Grant that some of you always think he is suddenly going to do a double somersault and land in our rear on both flanks at the same time. Go back to your command and try to think that what we are going to do to ourselves instead of what Lee is going to do. So Grant used his ability to bolster his troops, looking back in his personal life. Grant was one of the arguably the best Union generals at the time. And looking at the difference between the early generals and the later generals, even looking at comparing to the Confederacy, who had to completely start from scratch, even though they were generals that were trained, uh, the North had a lot more resources to go from. And remembering that these were humans, the outcomes affected them beyond what is written on paper, which there you can see a lot of the hesitation and a lot of the orders, because these men were attempting to s save their soldiers and win the battle. But these articles mainly look at the North and look through documents in their research styles, by looking through correspondence and a lot using that to have an insight on how these generals' personal lives affected their leadership on the battlefield, and leading their men possibly to death. Thank you and have a good week.